My best friend's father groped my girlfriend at his rehearsal dinner. Then he threatened me for speaking up. Now they're praised as victims, but I unleashed a truth that will haunt their bloodline. Throwaway account because this whole situation is still unfolding, and I honestly don't know if I handled it right. What happened last weekend at my childhood best friend's wedding has completely destroyed our 20-year friendship, and I'm questioning everything. My name is Alex. I'm 32, and my best friend David has been like a brother to me since we were 12 years old. We've been through everything together: high school, college, my divorce 3 years ago, his engagement last year. When he asked me to be his best man, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. David comes from what I always thought was a pretty normal family. His dad, Roger, is this gregarious guy in his late 50s who runs a successful construction company. Always seemed like a stand-up dude, maybe a little too fond of his bourbon, but I'd known him for 2 decades and never saw anything that raised red flags. Roger's the kind of guy who remembers your birthday, asks about your job, and always picks up the check at dinner. He'd helped me move apartments twice and even offered to loan me money during my divorce proceedings. His mom, Patricia, is one of those perfectly put-together suburban wives who runs charity events and keeps the family social calendar. She comes from old money. Her father owned half the commercial real estate in town before he died, and she's never let anyone forget it. The family lives in this massive colonial house that Patricia inherited, and Roger's construction business has thrived partly because of her family connections. My girlfriend Maya, who's 29, had met David's family a few times over the past year we'd been dating. She's naturally shy around new people, but she seemed to get along fine with everyone. Maya works as a pediatric nurse, so she's used to dealing with all kinds of people and situations with grace. What I didn't know then was that Maya had been assaulted in college, something she'd never told me because she was still processing the trauma. The rehearsal dinner was held at this upscale country club that Patricia had booked months in advance. Everything was picture-perfect: white tablecloths, string quartet, the whole 9 yards. Roger had spared no expense, constantly mentioning how much everything cost and how he wanted only the best for David's special day. He'd even hired a photographer just for the rehearsal, saying money was no object when it came to family. David was nervous but happy, his bride Jessica was glowing, and I was honestly just proud to be part of their special weekend. Roger was in his element, playing the generous father, making toasts about how proud he was of David, how beautiful Jessica looked, how lucky they were to have found each other. About 15 minutes into the cocktail hour, I was across the room talking to David's college roommates when I noticed Maya looked uncomfortable. She was standing near the bar with Jessica's sister and a few other bridesmaids, but something about her body language seemed off. She kept glancing around the room like she was looking for an escape route. I was about to walk over when I saw Roger approach their little group. Now, Roger's always been a touchy-feely kind of guy, lots of back pats and shoulder squeezes, the typical successful businessman behavior. He'd always been like that with everyone, men and women alike. Hell, he'd hugged me goodbye after every family dinner for 20 years. But what I witnessed next was different. Roger walked up behind Maya, put his hand on her lower back in what looked like a friendly gesture, and then deliberately slid it down. Maya visibly tensed up and tried to step away, but Roger moved with her, his hand lingering where it shouldn't have been. Then Roger leaned in close to Maya's ear and said something that made her face go completely white. Jessica's sister later told me she heard him say, "You know, Maya, you should come by the office sometime. I could show you around, maybe we could grab lunch." I was across the room, maybe 20 feet away, and it took me a few seconds to process what I'd just witnessed. By the time I started moving toward them, Roger had already walked away, seamlessly transitioning into a conversation with the wedding photographer about getting some candid shots of the younger women. When I reached Maya, she was barely holding it together. She grabbed my arm and whispered, "We need to talk, now." We stepped out onto the country club's terrace, and she quickly filled me in on what had happened. "Alex, he touched me." And the things he said. She was shaking, trying to keep her voice down. He said I should visit his office, that he could take care of me if I ever needed anything. The way he said it, the way he looked at me. Here's the thing about me: I'm normally a pretty calm, rational guy. I work in IT project management, so I'm used to solving problems methodically. But seeing Maya violated like that, especially by someone I'd known and trusted for 20 years, triggered something I didn't recognize in myself. Maya begged me not to make a scene. "Please don't ruin David's wedding, can we just get through this weekend?" But I couldn't let it slide. Not this time. Not when Roger thought he could assault my girlfriend and just walk away like nothing happened. I found Roger near the men's room, checking his phone and looking completely relaxed. When he saw me approaching, his face lit up with that familiar smile. "Alex, hell of a party, isn't it? Patricia really outdid herself with this place." "Roger, we need to talk." I kept my voice level, but something in my tone must have registered because his smile faltered slightly. "Sure, sure. What's on your mind?" I looked around, making sure we were relatively alone. What happened with Maya back there that can't happen again? Roger's expression didn't change, but I caught something in his eyes, a flicker of calculation. "I'm not sure what you mean, Alex. I was just being friendly, making sure all of David's friends felt welcome." "You know exactly what I mean." He laughed, but it sounded forced. "Come on, Alex. Don't tell me you're one of those guys who gets jealous when other men talk to his girlfriend. Maya's a lovely girl, very approachable. I was just being hospitable." The way he said approachable made my stomach turn. "Stay away from her, Roger. I'm not asking." Roger's mask slipped for just a moment. I saw something cold and calculating underneath the jovial father of the groom persona. "You know, Alex, you might want to be careful about making accusations, especially about family. People might get the wrong idea about your stability." That threat should have been my first clue about what I was really dealing with. But at the time, I was too focused on protecting Maya to think about the implications. Roger had just threatened my reputation, my relationship with David, maybe even my livelihood, all while maintaining that fake smile. The rest of the rehearsal dinner passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Roger played the perfect host, making sure everyone's drinks were full, telling stories about David's childhood, posing for photos with the wedding party. To anyone watching, he looked like a devoted father celebrating his son's happiness. But I noticed things I'd missed before. The way his hand lingered on women's shoulders when he posed for photos. How he positioned himself next to the younger bridesmaids during group shots. The comments he made about how beautiful all the women looked, always with that slightly too long pause. Maya stayed close to me for the rest of the evening, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she flinched whenever Roger came near our table. When he stood up to make a toast about David and Jessica, I watched Maya's hands shake as she reached for her water glass. Despite everything, Maya and I decided to stay for the wedding. She didn't want to be the reason David's big day was ruined, and honestly, I was hoping we could get through the ceremony without any more incidents. That hope was shattered during the pre-ceremony photos. I was busy with best man duties, making sure David's boutonniere was straight and helping coordinate the groomsmen, when Maya appeared at my elbow looking like she'd seen a ghost. "He cornered me by the bridal suite," she whispered. "He said he'd been thinking about our conversation last night and that he hoped I'd reconsider his offer to visit his office." The way she said it, I knew there was more. "What else, Maya?" he said. He said he could help me with my student loans, that he had connections at the hospital where I work, and that he could put in a good word if I was willing to be flexible about our friendship. I felt something snap inside me. Roger wasn't just a handsy drunk, he was a predator using his wealth and connections to manipulate vulnerable women. The student loan comment was particularly calculated. He'd somehow learned about Maya's financial struggles and was using them as leverage. I found Roger holding court with some of the older wedding guests, regaling them with stories about his latest construction projects and name-dropping local politicians he'd worked with. He was in his element, the successful businessman everyone looked up to. "Roger, a word?" I didn't wait for his response, just started walking toward a quieter corner of the venue. He followed, still wearing that practiced smile. "Alex, you look tense. Wedding jitters. I remember when David was born, I was so nervous I cut the shit." The words came out harder than I'd intended. "I know what you're doing, and it stops now." Roger's smile finally disappeared. "I think you're confused about something, Alex. Maybe you should take a step back and think about what you're really saying here." "I'm saying you're a predator. I'm saying you assault women and then use your money and connections to keep them quiet. That's a very serious accusation." Roger's voice was calm, but I could see the anger in his eyes. The kind of accusation that could destroy a man's reputation. His business, his family. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm reminding you that words have consequences, especially false words." The ceremony itself was beautiful, but I couldn't focus on David's happiness. I kept watching Roger, who had somehow managed to position himself in the front row where he had a clear view of all the bridesmaids. During the vows, I caught him staring at Maya with an expression that made my skin crawl. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour before the reception, I noticed Roger had cornered Jessica's 19-year-old cousin near the bar. She looked uncomfortable, backing away as he leaned in closer, his hand on her arm. I started moving toward them, but Patricia intercepted me. Alex, dear, could you help me with something? I need someone strong to move some gifts. By the time I finished helping Patricia, Roger had moved on, and Jessica's cousin was nowhere to be seen. When I finally found her, she was in the bathroom crying. She wouldn't tell me what Roger had said, just kept repeating that she wanted to go home. The reception was when everything finally exploded. Roger had been drinking heavily throughout the day, and his behavior was becoming more blatant. During his father of the groom speech, he made several comments about how lucky David was to have found such a beautiful bride, his eyes roaming over Jessica in a way that made everyone uncomfortable. After dinner, I watched Roger work the room like a predator stalking prey. He'd approach groups of women, particularly the younger ones, and slowly isolate them from their friends. His pattern was always the same: compliments about their appearance, questions about their careers, offers to help with connections or opportunities. When I saw him corner Maya again, this time near the coat check, I'd had enough. She was trapped between him and the wall, and I could see the panic in her eyes as he leaned in close, his hand on the wall next to her head. Maya, I called out, loud enough for several people to hear. There you are, David's looking for you. Roger stepped back, but not before I saw the flash of anger in his eyes. We were just having a nice conversation, weren't we, Maya? Maya nodded quickly, but I could see she was shaking. As we walked away, Roger called after us, Alex, don't forget what we talked about earlier, about being careful with accusations. That night, back at our hotel, Maya finally broke down completely. She told me everything, not just about Roger's behavior at the wedding, but about similar incidents she'd experienced in college, at work, throughout her life. Men who used their power and position to make her feel helpless and afraid. I can't keep pretending this is normal, she sobbed. I can't keep smiling and being polite while men like him think they can do whatever they want. I held her while she cried, feeling my own anger building. Not just at Roger, but at myself for not acting sooner, for caring more about preserving David's wedding than protecting the woman I loved. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I called the police. The police took Maya's statement seriously, especially when she mentioned Roger's comments about his connections and his offers to help with her career and student loans. The detective explained that this pattern of behavior, using wealth and influence to coerce sexual favors, was a form of sexual harassment that could escalate to assault. They also interviewed Jessica's cousin, who finally admitted that Roger had cornered her and made explicit comments about what he wanted to do to her. She'd been too scared to tell anyone because Roger had mentioned that he knew her father through business connections. When the police contacted the country club, they discovered that Roger had been asked to leave a private event there 2 years earlier after multiple complaints about his behavior toward female staff members. The club had kept quiet about it because of his family's membership status and financial contributions. David called me 3 days after the wedding, and I could hear the strain in his voice. Alex, what the hell is going on? Dad's been questioned by police. Mom's having a breakdown. People are talking. David, I tried to handle this quietly. Your father wouldn't stop. Stop what? Alex, you're talking about my dad, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who paid for my college, who built his business from nothing. You're destroying him over what exactly? I could hear it in his voice, the same willful blindness I'd seen in so many families dealing with abuse. The desperate need to believe that the person you love couldn't possibly be capable of such things. Your father sexually harassed Maya multiple times. He also targeted Jessica's cousin and probably other women. This isn't about destroying him, David. This is about protecting people. Protecting people. Or getting revenge because you couldn't handle some harmless flirting. That's when I realized I'd already lost my best friend. David had made his choice, and it wasn't Maya's safety or the truth. It was preserving his image of his father, even if it meant sacrificing everything else. What I didn't expect was how dirty Roger would fight back. Within a week of the police investigation beginning, I started experiencing problems at work. My company's biggest client, a construction firm that had contracts with Roger's company, suddenly expressed concerns about my professionalism and stability. My boss called me into his office, clearly uncomfortable. Alex, I don't know what's going on in your personal life, but it's affecting your professional reputation. Maybe you should consider taking some time off until this blows over. Maya faced similar pressure. Suddenly, her schedule at the hospital was cut, and she was passed over for a promotion she'd been promised. When she asked her supervisor about it, she was told there had been concerns raised about her judgment and reliability. Roger was using his network, his influence, his money to systematically destroy our lives. And the worst part was, it was working. The criminal case against Roger moved slowly through the system. His lawyer, one of the most expensive defense attorneys in the state, filed motion after motion, trying to get the charges dismissed. They argued that Maya's testimony was unreliable, that she was motivated by money, that the whole thing was a setup. Meanwhile, Roger filed a civil suit against me for defamation, claiming that my false accusations had damaged his business and reputation. The legal fees were crushing. I had to take out a second mortgage on my condo just to pay my attorney. Patricia filed for divorce, but not for the reasons I expected. She wasn't leaving Roger because of his predatory behavior. She was leaving because the scandal was destroying her social standing. In her divorce papers, she actually blamed Maya and me for destroying the family with our vindictive lies. The worst part was watching our community choose sides. Roger had been a pillar of the local business community for decades. He donated to charities, sponsored youth sports teams, employed hundreds of people. When the allegations became public, many people simply refused to believe them. Maya and I were ostracized from social circles we'd been part of for years. Friends stopped calling. Invitations dried up. People would cross the street to avoid talking to us. The message was clear: we were the troublemakers, the ones who disrupted the natural order of things. David's wedding became a symbol of everything we'd supposedly destroyed. People talked about how we'd ruined such a beautiful day, how we'd torn apart such a wonderful family. The fact that Roger had actually committed the crimes seemed secondary to the social disruption we'd caused. Roger's trial finally began 18 months after the wedding. The prosecution presented a compelling case: Maya's testimony, Jessica's cousin's account, evidence of Roger's pattern of behavior, testimony from the country club staff about previous incidents. Roger's defense was masterful. They painted him as a successful businessman being destroyed by vindictive accusations. They brought in character witnesses, employees who praised his generosity, charity recipients who spoke about his philanthropy, business partners who vouched for his integrity. They portrayed Maya as an opportunist who'd targeted a wealthy family, and me as a jealous, unstable man who'd manipulated his girlfriend into making false accusations. They suggested that Maya's history of assault in college made her an unreliable witness, that she was seeing predators where none existed. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Roger testified in his own defense, presenting himself as a loving father and devoted husband who'd been destroyed by malicious lies. He was articulate, sympathetic, and completely convincing. The jury deliberated for 2 days before returning a verdict of not guilty on all charges. Roger's acquittal was treated as vindication by the community. He held a press conference outside the courthouse, flanked by his legal team and supporters, talking about how justice had been served and how false accusations could destroy innocent lives. Maya and I were devastated. Not just by the verdict, but by what it represented: that wealth and influence could still triumph over truth, that victims could be silenced by superior legal representation and social pressure. The financial cost of the trial had been enormous. We'd both lost our jobs, burned through our savings, and accumulated massive legal debt. My relationship with David was irreparably damaged, and most of our mutual friends had chosen his side. But the personal cost was even higher. Maya's trauma had been re-traumatized by the trial process. She'd been forced to relive her assault over and over, only to have her credibility questioned and her motives impugned. She started having panic attacks, couldn't sleep, and struggled with depression. It's been 3 years since David's wedding, and we're still rebuilding our lives. Maya found a new job at a different hospital, and I eventually started my own IT consulting business. We moved to a different city where Roger's influence couldn't reach us. Maya has been in therapy, working through not just the trauma of Roger's assault, but the additional trauma of the trial and its aftermath. She's stronger now, but she's also more guarded, more suspicious of people's motives. I've struggled with my own guilt and anger. Guilt that I couldn't protect Maya better, that my actions led to so much pain and destruction. Anger at Roger, at David, at a system that allowed wealth and influence to triumph over justice. The friendship that had defined half my life is over. David and I haven't spoken since the trial. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he and Jessica divorced last year apparently. The stress of the scandal and trial had been too much for their marriage. Roger's business continued to thrive. If anything, the trial had enhanced his reputation in certain circles as a man who'd stood up to false accusations and won. He was featured in business magazines as an example of how to handle a crisis, how to protect your reputation when under attack. I still don't know if I made the right choices. Should I have handled it differently? Should I have tried harder to resolve it privately? Should I have accepted that sometimes predators win and victims lose and focused on protecting Maya without seeking justice? The rational part of me knows that Roger's acquittal doesn't mean he was innocent. It just means that the legal system, with all its flaws and biases, couldn't prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. But the emotional part of me wonders if I destroyed Maya's life and my own for nothing. Maya says she doesn't regret speaking up, that even though we lost the trial, we did the right thing. She points out that Jessica's cousin found the courage to report a later incident with Roger to her college administration, and that other women have come forward with similar stories. Maybe we didn't get justice, but we broke the silence. Roger's influence in our old community remains strong. He's been elected to the city council, and his construction company has won several major municipal contracts. He's remarried a woman 20 years younger than Patricia, and they're prominent in local social circles. Patricia moved to Florida and changed her name back to her maiden name. She's never publicly acknowledged that Roger might have been guilty, but she's also never defended him. She exists in a kind of limbo, neither condemning nor supporting the man she was married to for 30 years. David has struggled more than I expected. According to mutual friends, he's been in and out of therapy, dealing with the cognitive dissonance of loving a father who might be a predator. He's never publicly taken sides, but his silence speaks volumes. Our experience has taught me uncomfortable truths about power, privilege, and justice. Roger wasn't just a random predator, he was a man with resources, connections, and social standing. He had the tools to fight back, to destroy his accusers, to reshape the narrative in his favor. Maya and I were naive to think that truth and justice would be enough. We underestimated the power of wealth and influence, the tendency of communities to protect their own, the reluctance of people to believe uncomfortable truths about respected figures. We also underestimated the personal cost of speaking up. The financial burden, the social ostracism, the psychological trauma of having your credibility questioned and your motives impugned. The way that seeking justice can become a form of punishment for the victims. Here's what I need to know from all of you: did I do the right thing? Should I have handled Roger's assault of Maya differently? Was destroying our lives, our relationships, our community standing worth the attempt to seek justice, even though we ultimately failed? I know that protecting Maya was non-negotiable, but I can't shake the feeling that there might have been a better way to handle the situation. The guilt is eating me alive, especially when I think about how this affected not just us, but everyone around us. Part of me wonders if I should have just taken Maya and left the wedding quietly. If I should have focused on supporting her healing rather than seeking justice. If I should have accepted that sometimes predators win and victims lose, and that fighting back only creates more victims. But then I think about Jessica's cousin, about the other women who have come forward, about the possibility that our speaking up prevented other assaults. Maybe we didn't get the justice we sought, but maybe we accomplished something else. Maybe we broke the silence. Maybe we made it a little bit harder for Roger to continue his predatory behavior. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you want to hear more stories about the complicated reality of seeking justice against powerful people, hit subscribe and tap the bell.